if you're not aggressively trying to get a 20% raise every year, you're being diluted. Like your share of the monetary network is diminishing, and you're on the wrong side of the Cantillon effect. A rapid currency dilution environment does is it puts every single person in that country on a treadmill to run as fast as they can to keep up with it, not just in terms of where to put their savings, but also how to continually increase their wages so that they're not just being completely left behind in global purchasing power terms. Of course, the same thing is actually true in developed countries. It's just more subtle. So in the United States, money supply grows at about 7% a year on average. And let's say money supply per capita, right? So if money supply is growing at 7% on average, money supply per capita is probably growing at 6% on average. If you're not keeping up with that, you're becoming a smaller share of the network.
Today, we're joined by Lyn Alden, a renowned macro analyst who sheds light on the challenges of currency dilution and its impact on individual financial stability, not just in emerging economies, but also in developed nations like the United States. Stay tuned as we delve into this crucial topic with Lyn's expert insights. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful content and help us grow by liking and commenting. Your interaction boosts our visibility and supports the channel. Let's now dive deeper into this discussion with Lyn Alden. She'll guide us through the intricate world of currency markets and reveal how rapid currency dilution is shaping financial landscapes worldwide.
In the current system, there are 160 different fiat currencies, roughly. And they're all like these little silos. They all have a local monopoly on their jurisdiction. They have very little salability outside of their jurisdiction, except for the dollar and a few other top currencies. And that is largely enforced due to the legacy system. So you can only really get money in size in or out two ways of a country. One is physical ports of entry, so you can bring cash or gold through an airport. Obviously, you're usually tightly limited there, usually under $10,000 worth, sometimes less. And the other way is wire transfers in or out, but those are completely controlled by, government central bank regulations. And they get to decide, if I send dollars to someone in another country, does that person receive them in dollars, or do they get converted to local currency at the official exchange rate, whatever it might be. And even fintech companies are just really mostly just overlays on top of the correspondent banking wire system. They just basically have accounts in multiple things and can make those go quicker, but they're still usually relying on the underlying banking. And with things like Bitcoin and stablecoin, and there's even gold-backed stablecoins. But what all these technologies do is kind of crack open these 160 different silos and allow monies to compete globally once again. So someone in Nigeria can now, you can bring infinite value density of Bitcoin or stablecoins through an airport by memorizing 12 words, for example. Or if I pay a graphic designer in Nigeria, she can hold up a QR code on a call just like this, and I can pay her, and she gets, it could be Bitcoin, it could be stablecoins, whatever she asks her for in her invoice, she can receive, and it just goes around her local banking system. As long as, from my perspective, as long as like I'm not breaking any American laws, like I can't really necessarily hire like an Iranian graphic designer, but as long as I'm not sending money to a sanctioned country, this is now a method to get value to someone in the money she wants rather than being stuck with the local system. As long as she has access to email, DMs, video, and basically internet connection, she can now bypass those prior two methods. And so the world's becoming more interconnected in terms of money. And I think that has big implications going forward. I started to realize money was broken in some sense back in around 2017 or so, because we started to get a widening fiscal deficit in the US, even though we were not in a recession, which had not really happened since the Vietnam War. That was and it continued in 2018, 2019. And started looking more into how do sovereign debt bubbles end? Prior to that, I was like, well, eventually they print it or something, right? But it's like, okay, actually mechanically, what does this look like, and in what time frame, and what are the factors, and what to look for? So I started to do a multi-year deep dive, and that's actually what kind of led me to transition away from mostly focusing on equity investing to more focusing on macro, money, energy, that kind of stuff, because I realized that we're entering a unusual macro environment. That it's like the type of decade that kind of changes a lot of things. The bigger the normal things happen that history books kind of focus on. more than, other decades. And so in other words, I was like, this is gonna be a more macro decade than 90s were, for example. Um, and so that was kind of like the initial starting points. And then, of course, kind of like studying Bitcoin over time, seeing how that works. I originally I always found it neat, but I was like, I mean, the chance that any sort of like new techno money is going to work is obviously very low. So the first time you see it, you're like, that's neat, but I mean, come on. And then it's like when it comes back a second time, you're like, wow, that thing's still here. And then you're like, how does this thing work? And then you kind of like over time, you just kind of run into it more and more time. And so you actually think, okay, this is actually pretty interesting. It's the only asset that ever survived more like three 75% plus drawdowns and then went back to new all-time highs. I'm not aware of any other asset that has done that.
As Lyn Alden has insightfully pointed out, the global financial landscape is undergoing profound changes. Innovations like Bitcoin and gold-backed currencies, such as Kinesis Money, are transforming traditional financial systems, creating unique opportunities for global transactions. In this segment, Lyn Alden has shed light on the evolving nature of money, highlighting the increasing interconnectedness of financial systems worldwide. Let's continue to explore these groundbreaking developments and understand their far-reaching implications with Lyn's expert analysis.
There's 160 different currency bubbles in the world, and dozens of them are very bad, right? So the top handful, if you're an American, you don't really have to think about money that often. If you're in another developed country, you still think about the dollar occasionally, usually because commodities and things like that are usually priced in dollars. And so most people have kind of two currencies in their head. But if you're in a developing country, you're kind of a financial officer in addition to whatever normal job you have. You're trying to manage things and thinking about things that Americans and Europeans don't have to deal with that often, which is the currency itself just rapidly losing value or at any moment risking a sharp devaluation. There's currently about 30 countries that have double-digit inflation right now, and they have ballpark about 1 billion people in them. So this is not a small problem. And if you kind of sample it over a 30-year period, it'll affect billions. And so it kind of just hit home how siloed the financial system is. Another big problem is wages, as well as just overall pricing. So if you're a worker in Egypt, right? So money supply growth is about 20% per year on average. If you're not aggressively trying to get a 20% raise every year, you're being diluted. Like your share of the monetary network is diminishing, and you're on the wrong side of the Cantillon effect, right? So your money's being basically siphoned away from you. Your ongoing purchasing power in global terms. So for example, your dollar equivalent wages will be shrinking if you're not aggressively getting raises that keep pace with the Egyptian pound's devaluation. What a rapid currency dilution environment does is it puts every single person in that country on a treadmill to run as fast as they can to keep up with it, not just in terms of where to put their savings, but also how to continually increase their wages so that they're not just being completely left behind in global purchasing power terms. Of course, the same thing is actually true in developed countries. It's just more subtle. So in the United States, money supply grows at about 7% a year on average. And, let's say money supply per capita, right? So if money supply is growing at 7% on average, money supply per capita is probably growing at 6% on average. If you're not keeping up with that, you're becoming a smaller share of the network. And there are other people that are, say, closer to the source of money creation, bankers, large corporations that can issue tons of long duration, cheap debt. They're basically shorting the currency that you're earning your wages in. And they're getting outsized. They're outperforming that, say, 6% hurdle, while the average worker is struggling to keep up because anchoring bias is towards zero. So if I'm an employer and an employee comes to me and says, I want a 6% wage increase, my natural result is, I mean, are you 6% better than last year? And of course, the answer is, they're like, well, no, but money supply went up per capita 6%. And I'm as good or better than I was last year. In fact, I should ask for a 7 or 8% raise because I'm a little bit more productive and more experienced, and I just want to keep up with the currency dilution. But that's not how things work. And so having this kind of constant money supply growth just kind of makes it so that if you're not a financial asset owner, especially if you're not a financial asset owner that's also shorting the fiat currency with long duration, low cost debt, you're kind of not playing the game. Or at least you're kind of blocked out of the winning strategy. And that's that's why I consider money broken. It's basically the people who usually earn the most for the least effort are the rent seekers, basically the arbitraging this gap. Whereas I think a better world is where people that invent things, or people that run effective businesses, or people that are really good at their job. That's the type of people that should really succeed in this environment, rather than kind of arbitragers and financiers and leveragers and things like that. And so that's why overall I think money's broken, and that experiencing developing countries, not just Egypt, but Egypt's the one I have obviously the most experience with, really kind of helps with those details.
Today's discussion has been enlightening, revealing the deep-seated challenges in our global financial systems, from currency dilution to the struggle for wage parity. These insights underscore the importance of understanding the broader macroeconomic environment and its impact on our daily lives. As we wrap up, we encourage you to keep engaging with our content, share your thoughts, and support our channel by subscribing and turning on notifications. Together, we can deepen our financial knowledge and navigate these complex times more effectively.